Do you remember Mad Father? This game in my eyes, just like Misao, perfectly encapsulates the appeal of these old RPGMaker horror games. Not too complicated, they have their creepy moments, their scary moments, and they are remembered fondly by a large number of people. Why specifically am I talking about Mad Father after my previous video about Misao? Well, I put out a poll after the last video, which did much better than I expected. Thank you very much for that, lads and ladies. But I basically asked you all which RPGMaker horror game I should talk about next, and it went back and forth for a while. Fear and Hunger was in the lead for a bit, which would have been interesting because it would be an absolute nightmare for me to try and make a video about, since I'd want to get all the endings myself before I make a video on it. And given that my RNG in the game is very bad, it feels like an episode of Milo Murphy's Law when I play it. Easy coin toss, we always win them. It would just take too long, but fortunately for me, you all picked Mad Father in the end. And this makes sense since we started with Misao. And as I said in the previous video, Mad Father and Misao are by the same creator and are linked together, and they reference each other a bunch. So all praise Sen, creator of these classics. But another connection between these two is that they both got re-released on Steam with new sprite work, some CGs got polished and redrawn, and as far as I'm aware, for Mad Father, it got a whole new game mode, which was the bane of my existence when I was making this video, as I mentioned in a community post. But we'll get into that later, since this new game mode completely changes the plot, or at least how I perceived it when I first saw Markliplier or PewdiePie or whoever I watched play this game years ago. Just like the last video, however, I'm going to be talking about the game's entire plot, so spoilers, obviously. The plot. You play as Aya, a little girl who loves her father. She also loved her mother, however she passed away from sickness, supposedly. Basically, Aya wakes up in the middle of the night to tell her father that it's the anniversary of her mother's death, so they can go visit her grave in the morning. They rejoice and Aya returns to bed, whilst her father returns to whatever he was doing in the basement of his creepy haunted castle. Aya then returns to her bedroom and goes to sleep for the night, also noting as she's walking away to her bedroom that her father does creepy experiments in the basement. She knows this, but still loves him anyway. Aya, however, does not love her father's lab assistant Maria, who was helping her father with the experiments, but is also his side piece, so Aya doesn't really like her. So, at the start, she doesn't at least. Aya wakes up in the middle of the night to the screams of what appear to be her father back in the basement. So she goes to investigate just to find ghouls that he's created coming back to life due to some sort of curse. She runs away to see another one of these figures with a big hole in his face. He's seemingly trying to help us, but he's spooky looking, so we run back into the bedroom, just to be met by this familiar looking there. He basically explains the scenario, tells us that we need to prepare to see what our father has done if we want to save him. But Aya's like 8 or 10 or something, so she just kind of nods and says sure and heads into mortal danger to help her father, who by the way is in the game Mad Father. So I doubt this is going to go very well. Just like my last video, I'm going to go through each member of the cast as well as what they do in the plot. Now, unlike Misao, I'm going to talk about how they're presented in the normal game mode, and then afterwards I'll talk about what's revealed to us about these characters in both Blood mode and If mode. However, I will say this, the plot isn't as straightforward as Misao, and is a little bit more convoluted, so to speak. So try and keep up because you're about to get a big exposition dump about these characters. Aya Drevis. As I said, she's the main character. She's around 10, I think, during the main story. She seems relatively normal. But granted, since this is her father, chances are she isn't exactly going to become a well-adjusted adult. But you never know. Maybe she does become a normal, functioning member of society. She spends most of the game meeting all the experiments that her father has created through his research, running away from some and helping some others that are pretty chill, with the aid of her charming pet Snowball. She ventures into the basement, solving puzzles, acquiring mini chainsaws like it's Dead Rising 1, and just trying to save her father, despite the title of the game very much insinuating that he is not of sound mind. Since I'll have much more to say about Aya later, let's get into her father now. Alfred Drevis, the Mad Father. That's the name of the game! Wow! He's, pretty crazy. Okay, so the thing that makes him mad is that the Drevis family's research revolves around preserving beauty, so like stopping people from decaying and aging. Now, different parts of the family take that to mean different things. Some parts of the family say that means producing an heir and helping the family name live on, and that creates beauty and stuff like that, which makes sense. But the crazier parts of the Drevis family, they continue the family's research, which includes turning people into dolls to preserve their beauty, which is really creepy because as we go through the game, we are literally surrounded by shells shelves and hallways filled with dolls. Because of this research, that means each one of these was once a person that Alfred here, the titular mad father, has transformed into a doll using different pieces of their bodies. Now, as the plot of the game progresses, we come to learn that Alfred here aims to do the same to Aya as well. He loves his daughter in a weird mad fathery way, so he aims to make her beauty eternal by turning her into a doll. The weird thing about this is that due to the curse of the Drevis family and all the negative emotions left behind by all of this dude's experiments, as well as this guy's chicanery, all the dolls are kind of sentient. Some are pretty chill, some attack you, or some just block your path. But it's all because of this guy. Once Aya gets to the basement, we see Maria, who says that Alfred was whisked away by Monica. Aya's mother is called Monica, despite the fact that she's been dead for around a year. So Monica's ghost came back to get him. Why would she do that? Well, because Monica heard that Alfred was planning on turning his daughter into a doll, and she wasn't a fan of that. So she confronted him and got murked. Yeah, despite this fact, when Monica's ghost came back, it's still madly in love with Alfred and kind of just wants to drag him to hell with her, or purgatory, or whatever this is. It's the same area as Misao pretty much, so maybe it's Ogre's domain. Who knows, but we'll get into him later. Even after we as the player save him from that fate, he still goes mad, so to speak, and tries to turn us into a doll, which is pretty weird because throughout the game, it tries to show us that Alfred, as a father, has some positive aspects to kind of juxtapose moments like this. Like, he doesn't want Aya to become crazy like he is, but he does still want to mutilate her with a chainsaw and turn her into a doll, which is, you know, one of the bad endings. Overall, he's a goofy character. I mean, just looking at this guy from frame one, you can tell he is the namesake of the game, as well as, you know, the sounds that come from his basement. We know this dude is just going to try and cut us into pieces. Monica Drevis. In normal mode, Monica, aka Aya's mother, appears to be the voice of reason in a way. She knows what her husband is doing in the basement. She knows her husband is cheating on her with this random street rat he took in that we'll get into later. But she's pretty chill with it all, seemingly, until the aforementioned confrontation in which Alfred kills her. Yet, despite him wanting to turn Aya into a doll, him literally killing her, Monica is still very much in love with her husband, which, you know, is a hallmark of a healthy marriage. You know, it is nice in its messed up and creepy way, you know, that's pretty cool. Granted, she does also try to kill Aya because of this creepy post-mortem obsession, but throughout the early parts of the game, all we get of Monica is her being kind and sickly in flashbacks, until we see her come back and act like, you know, the Monica you're thinking of from Doki Doki, obsessed and lovesick for Alfred, even threatening to kill Aya over him, which kind of foreshadows what we find out about her during Blood and If mode, but we'll get into that later. Not much else to say about her, but she keeps up with the pattern of characters named Monica being yanderes. She's kind of complicated, but she's madly in love with her husband, but that is at odds with her husband's wishes to turn Aya into a doll, because she loves her husband, but she also loves Aya, just not as much as she loves her husband. Maria, the doctor's side piece, as well as his medical assistant. Basically, Alfred searches for new victims for his research by looking for, you know, street rats, orphans, people who won't be missed. He offers them food and board, then puts them in his dungeon. Then, you know, chainsaws away. So he takes Maria, puts her in the basement with a dude who was already injured, someone who's probably not going to survive the night. However, Maria, using whatever was around her, as well as her own clothes to make bandages, manages to stabilize this random patient, to Alfred's surprise. Seeing her potential in the field of medicine and how useful that could be in his research, he then properly takes her in, and in turn she becomes completely devoted to him, helping with his experiments, turning people into dolls, and then eventually helping him in other ways. You know, the non-YouTube way. Even when Alfred tells Maria that he plans to turn his own daughter into one of these dolls, Maria is still 100% devoted to this mad father, agreeing not to tell Aya about these plans. She's so devoted, in fact, that in one of the bad endings in which Alfred is taken away by Monica into purgatory or whatever, she vows to continue his research and tries to turn Aya into a doll, just as he does in another bad ending. Despite how ride or die she is for the most part, in the good endings of the game, after Maria is left injured on the floor, after failing to find Aya, Alfred slashes her a good bunch, and for the good ending, you have to do the same thing Maria did herself, and bandage Maria's wounds. And in doing so, Maria and Aya try to escape together. Doesn't go very well at the start. Alfred just kind of kicks Maria aside, all for her to eventually throw a bunch of knives into Alfred's body to save Aya at the end of the game. Maria basically just kind of switches teams after realizing that Alfred doesn't really care about her, just about how useful she is. But Aya showed her actual kindness, so she decides to devote herself to Aya instead. saving her life and becoming her guardian after the events of the main game. I mean, Aya sets up her own medical clinic and Maria assists with that and just becomes more of a parent to Aya than both her parents really were. I mean, she did help cut people up and turn them into dolls, as well as throw a bunch of knives into this dude who was pretty chill, but she gets a little bit of redemption at the end. Robin. This dude is pretty chill. He was one of the kids that Alfred brought in, experimented on, but was brought back due to this curse. He pretty much sees himself as Aya's big brother, because when he was first brought to Mansion Castle Drevis, or whatever it is, Alfred said as such, asking Robin to look over her. So throughout the course of the game, he tries to assist Aya. The first time he does, he has a massive gaping hole in his face, so Aya runs away, understandably so. A ghost with half of its face missing is pretty spooky. Next time we see him, he's bandaged his face as to not scare Aya. He also gets a bunch of throwing knives chucked into his torso from Maria, because she thought, Robin, I mean, he's a ghost, it's fair enough. Overall, he's chilling because he's a weird zombie ghost thing, which was revived by Monica to help Aya survive. He lost his parents and his little sister for an unknown reason, so he's initially against helping Aya, but he hears Aya singing a lovely tune, so he decides, maybe she's not that bad. Overall, he watches over Aya throughout the course of the story because of both Alfred's initial promise of him being her older brother, as well as Monica's wishes to keep Aya safe. And at the end of the game, he's the one that uses all the other curses in the home to set the castle ablaze, so that the research of the Drevis family ends and cannot be continued. Ogre, aka Onigawara from Misao. When discussing Ogre, we will transition to discussing the events of the If game mode, because in the playthrough of the normal story, Ogre appears sparingly, not showing up all that much. He gives Aya a rundown of the situation at the start of the game and only really shows up at key points to explain little bits and pieces and give Aya some magical holy water to help her defeat her mother and allow her to pass on. However, at the end of the game, after we get an after credits scene, in this scene we see how this game connects to Misao. Ogre takes Alfred away from the burning mansion to seemingly some random lab in which Alfred has started to create a clone of Aya. Now, for those who are cultured and watched my last video, or just, played Misao, this room might look familiar. Yes, it is in fact the lab from Misao, which means chances are the mad scientist that cuts Yoshino apart is more than likely our slightly less than sane friend Alfred from Mad Father. And library is probably the clone of Aya we see in the after credits of Mad Father. It's pretty obvious. I mean, just looking at the mad scientist sprite, it's pretty much the same, except now he uses a wheelchair for some reason. Maybe this is just because he's been conducting experiments for so long that his body started shutting down. Who knows? But given that library shares the same blue eyes as Aya, it is heavily implied that she is a clone of Aya, along with a lot of the other pieces of dialogue when you are naming library. Now, the reason I brought up If mode is because in this mode, we play as the aforementioned Robin, going through the mansion one last time, exploring on his own just before the mansion is set ablaze during the game's finale. However, he goes to the dining room, and when he does, he comes across Ogre. In this interaction with Ogre, he reveals that he was kind of the puppet master of this entire game, and given how he acts in a similar role in Misao, it's fair to say that he is much more than an observer than he originally seems to be. He reveals that he enjoys watching interesting sights, seeing humans do messed up stuff, so he enjoys the presence of deranged people and watching what they do. Also, as he says, he likes virtuous humans like Robin as well, since it would be boring if the world was just lunatics. His actions ensure that everyone who he wants to survive, survives, and everyone else can perish or become of use to him later, as we see with Alfred. He gives Aya the water to keep her safe from her mother, he takes Alfred away to do his messed up research in a different world, as well as pretty much setting up both Mad Father and Misao in their entirety, silently pulling the strings to ensure that they don't end in dull ways. That pretty much covers the normal story, right? As well as If mode. But I will say this, the reason it's called If mode is because if Aya became evil like her father, what would Robin do? And he would, stop her. That's why it's called If mode. But I haven't really mentioned Blood mode yet. Now, this game mode is literally just normal mode, but as adult Aya. You see, at the end of normal mode, we see an adult Aya running her own clinic, and it heavily implies that Aya is going down the same path as her father, conducting the Drevis family research. Turns out, we find out in Blood mode, she's not really doing that. She's overall pretty chill and just heals people, but she still does love her father after everything he tried to do to her. But the funny thing about Blood mode is that it starts with a random woman giving Aya like a pink-purple apple, and without question, she just eats it, which immediately puts her in a coma dream where she has to relive the course of the original game, but as her current self. Throughout this run, we get more exposition about how Monica, Aya's mother, wasn't exactly as kind as she let on. Turns out Alfred married into the Drevis house, pretty much. And Monica's family was conducting research long before Alfred even came into the picture. Turns out Monica's family was part of a cult that was conducting research into preserving beauty, and Monica's grandparents wanted her to pursue that end in different ways. Her grandmother wanted her to create beauty through the creation of a new descendant for the future, creating life, through a child, whilst her grandfather, the seemingly leader of the cult, wanted her to continue his research into finding eternal beauty through, hacking people apart. So Monica did both. She created an heir who would continue her grandfather's research, the best of both worlds. Despite how Alfred was a crazed madman, he did try to raise Aya with good morals, teaching her to say sorry for hurting people, that sort of stuff, whilst her mother encouraged her to be rougher with her pets and to her animals. Monica was attempting to groom Aya into taking over the Drevis research. Alfred fits into this picture as he was initially just a killer, killing his own mother in cold blood, but wiping down her face with a napkin and being enamored by its beauty in death. Eventually, he came across Monica, attempted to kill her, but for some reason leaves her alive. And since Monica is from a macabre and creepy cult, she is obsessed with killers and murderers, and she writes them letters to find out what all their kills were like. So when she came across Alfred and was nearly killed by him, head over heels, she was instantly in love. Now these set of characteristics paint the actions that Monica takes through the course of the game in a very different light. She didn't want Alfred to turn Aya into a doll because Monica loved her daughter, so much as it was Monica wanted Aya to continue her family's research, and if she's a doll, she can't do that. That's why she was also willing to kill her own daughter so that she could have Alfred all for herself. Though Monica may have loved her daughter in some strange messed up way, it was a combination of her wanting to fulfill her grandfather's wishes, as well as her fascination with serial killers and wanting Aya to be just like Alfred, and her wanting to do that got her killed by Alfred's hands. So yeah, Blood Mode just kind of reveals that Monica wasn't all that nice to begin with, which I think is a pretty cool subversion. It is hinted at a few times with the base game as well, especially with this old servant dude who was hired and in turn killed by Monica. But yeah, that's pretty much the characters, what they do in the game, and the plot overall, right? It wasn't very succinct, but that's the long and short of it. Let's talk about the actual game. What's the gameplay actually like in this game? Gameplay. Now, given how long the plot section was in this video about an old game, you'd assume the game part of the video would have a lot to say. Well, there isn't. The gameplay is very simple, and for the most part, it's identical to its contemporaries. It's pretty much similar to Misao. However, I would say that this game has a lot more actual puzzle solving. Like, there aren't actually many thought puzzles going on in Misao that you need to really figure out. Everything is pretty simple. It's the same sort of stuff here, it's just that there's more puzzles. Now, this ties in with the side objective of the game, which is the gems. Obviously, the goal of the game is to solve puzzles, to make it deeper into the dungeon, to save your father. However, the side objective in the game is to collect all 20 gems, and in doing so you get the after credit scene. It's 21 gems in the older version of the game. You get these gems through doing puzzles for the most part, helping all of Alfred's victims pass over, giving them their eyes, or reuniting them with family members. Pretty simple stuff. There is no collecting deaths like in Misao either. Instead of deaths acting as collectibles, it's these gems. But there isn't really much to say about the gameplay. You explore the castle in standard RPGMaker horror fashion, escape enemies, you do quick time events to avoid deaths. Pretty standard fare. The gameplay works well, but I will say this. I think it's an addition to the remaster of the game, but they made it so you can skip certain puzzles and skip certain sections so that you're not purely backtracking or you're just not doing a monotonous puzzle that you just can't figure out. I personally feel that these additions just make the game flow a lot better. Like if I have to go through this doll stealth section to get a key to solve a puzzle, I'd rather not have to do the whole stealth section again just to get back to where I came from. It'd be very tedious to do so, and this version of the game fixes that, I think. I don't think it's in the old version. Feel free to correct me down below. So yeah, not much to say. The gameplay is simple and effective, and you can pick up a mini chainsaw, which is pretty cool. Miscellaneous. Now here are just some little bits and pieces that I just like about the game, or things I just want to make note of. One thing I do really love about this game is how it just kind of flows into Misao perfectly. This game came out before Misao, so this ending back in the day must have been really hype for fans of, of Mad Father, who were waiting to see what Sen made next, which in hindsight is a shame, because after Misao, Sen never made a continuation to these two games, which is pretty sad in my opinion. However, there is a little bit of a silver lining. On Twitter, Sen has made a bunch of webcomics that feature characters from both Misao and Mad Father, sometimes together. Some of them are funny, some of them are strange, but they are all cool little pieces of extra material if you enjoy these two games. And they also give a neat little insight into how Sen views his own characters and their personality traits, which is pretty cool. I'll leave his Twitters in the description so you can check them out. He often leaves like an English translation of these comics on his Twitter, which is pretty cool. One other thing, right, about Misao and Mad Father that I did not know about before making this video, okay, was the fact that both of these games have novelizations that I did not know about, and I couldn't find them online anywhere. No raws, no translations, nowhere, nothing. If you go on Sen's website, he has links for the books on Amazon JP, but you know, I'm not in Japan and I can't read Japanese, so that's not of much use to me, which is a shame, because if you've seen the content on my main channel, you'd know that I don't mind reading novels for series that I enjoy. As I say though, I couldn't find anything much about them online. Maybe in the future, if someone translates them and I can read them, I'll make a video about them, but for now, it's just kind of cool to know that these games have novel versions, right? That's pretty neat. Conclusion. Overall, between this game and Misao, I slightly prefer Misao of the two, but that's not to say I don't enjoy Mad Father. On the contrary, I really do love this game. Yes, I may have rose-tinted glasses for it, like a lot of people do, because we all probably watched our favourite Let's Players go through it years ago. But even after multiple playthroughs of this game, for the sake of this video, I really do enjoy Mad Father. The plot is pretty interesting, the gameplay and puzzles are simple but effective, and nothing too obtuse, like a lot of other games in the genre, and it just makes me feel nostalgic for a better time, which is a weird thing to say about a game centering around a madman who wants to cut his daughter apart with a chainsaw, but hey, what can you do? That's Mad Father and my thoughts on it. Let me know your thoughts on the game down below, as well as your thoughts on the video, and please do tell me what RPGMaker horror game you want me to cover next. With that being said, toodles my doodles, hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Peace.